Now let us have a look at the history of classification, how historically the branch of science has evolved. We are going to see who were the pioneers who started this classification. So when we talk about this, we have the name of Aristotle, who pioneered in this branch of science by his great chain of being. Alright. Aristotle gave his great chain of being where he arranged the organism in a hierarchy. So when we talk about classification, we have to reach to the taxonomic hierarchy by understanding the various life forms and how they are arranged. And when we see the classification, we see that the hierarchy that we reach is according to the taxonomic characteristics and the taxonomic rules which are implied. So the first one was Hippocrates in 460 to around this 400 BC. What he and Aristotle, who came after Hippocrates, these two, they organized, or you can say they arranged the animals into various classes like insects, birds, fishes and whales. So these two, they arranged the organisms in these classes. Followed by this, followed by these two came Theophrastus. He is known as father of botany as well. He arranged the plants into trees, shrubs, undershrubs and herbs. So we have two mentions. Theophrastus had written a book known as Historia plantarum. Okay, so it was also around 300 BC, and in his book he had mentioned the classification of plants, where he classified the plants into trees and shrubs and herbs. Now next was John Ray. Now this person you have to remember, because he was the one who gave the term species, and on the basis of the affinities that are present between the species, he started understanding the classification mechanisms. And John Ray had written the book Historia generalis plantarum, where he had mentioned as many as 18,000 species of plants. He had done such a holistic study, as much as 18,000 species of plants he had studied, and he wrote in his book, which is named as Historia generalis plantarum, and in this he gave various criteria according to which he had classified the plants. Then came the one who have changed or revolutionized the classification study entirely. He was Careless Lineas, a Swedish scientist. He mentioned many terms and many classification criteria, where he started using the natural system of classification. He had written two journals, that is Systema Naturae and Species Plantarum. In his books he had mentioned peculiar thing, that was binomial nomenclature. Before he mentioned binomial nomenclature, the nomenclature that was practiced was polynomial nomenclature, and then he altogether changed the classification concepts and introduced binomial nomenclature. At the same time, the artificial system of classification was replaced by a natural system, all thanks to Careless Lineas. Then came many scientists who, classification scientists who proposed the systems, like Bentham and Hooker came. They also, on the basis of natural system classification, they also proposed some classification mechanisms. Now, on the course of history, how this entire taxonomic study has evolved, we are going to see that. First of all, you know, there was natural system of classification till 1800, in fact till 1900. Later on, in around 1950s, there came a term known as phonetics. Now what is phonetics? It is numerical taxonomy, and you must keep in mind that this cannot be performed, these taxonomic studies cannot be performed without usage of good calculating devices or computers, you can say. Now why do we need calculating devices? Because in this type of classification, the basic of classification, the basis on which the various organisms are compartmentalized in different taxons, the basis is various characters. That means we are considering the numerical value of similar characters. So there are many characters which are taken into consideration, and then those similar characters are assigned, how many similar characters are present, and on the basis of those numerical data, the classification is being made. So we have phonetics. phonetics. Then there was on the other spectrum of taxonomy, as phonetics was developing, on the other spectrum there was cladistics or phylogenetic classification that came into being. Cladistics deals with the evolutionary relationships. Okay, these evolutionary relationships, they are going to take into account the how species are closely related to each other, how they have evolved over the time, what is the relationship that evolution has developed between two species. So that gives rise to phylogenetic classification. From phylogenetic classification there rose another branch that is known as biosystematics, and Sir Julian Huxley gave this term in 1940s, that there is a branch of taxonomy that is known as biosystematics, which deals with the phylogenetic classification and the relationships. So the taxons would be made according to these relationships, how the species have evolved in time. Okay, the evolutionary relationship would be taken into consideration, and the close proximities and affinities between the species would be considered in biosystematics. Now the next thing that we have is cytotaxonomy. Now when I talk about cytotaxonomy, break this is taxonomy and cyto. Cyto word refers to cell. So what we are going to deal with is, inside the cell of an individual organism we are going to see certain characteristics. Now what all the cell comprises of, first of all there would be a nucleus. Primarily we deal with the chromosome numbers, the chromosome size, that is the basis of cytotaxonomy. Apart from the other organelles, but our basic concern is the chromosome number, their size, their structures, that is of prime importance. On the basis of similarity of chromosome structures and numbers and whatever we are considering, we have cytotaxonomy, and according to that the organisms are arranged into different criteria, taxons. And the last one is chemotaxonomy. You have to remember, in chemotaxonomy we are mostly concerned with plants and the chemicals which are present inside the plant. So the chemical analysis of the compounds of the plant is done, and the similarity, that means we are dealing with biochemistry over here. So the chemotaxonomy deals with biochemistry of various chemicals which are present inside the plants. So in a way you are aware of how the classification, or we can say the systematic study that is known as taxonomy, has evolved in the recent course of history. That's not recent though, it's more than 2 centuries I would say, but how we have evolved, how we have come to the most accurate method using computers and using our knowledge and using different inputs by various scientists, we have arrived to a level and the system of classification which is the most accurate one. So this is all about the history of classification.